Okay, we are live.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for talking about community engagement insights, the Wikimedia Communities and Contributors Survey from 2017. My name is Edward Galvez. Next slide. And I am an evaluation strategist at the Learning and Evaluation team. I have another title called Survey Specialist as well. So a little bit about the Learning and Evaluation team in case you have heard of it or not sure what it is. We are a team that supports Wikimedia communities to use evaluation for learning and to improve decision-making that will better the Wikimedia projects and communities. So a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. I am going to be talking about the survey, introduce the survey, why it matters, and how we did it. I'm going to share a little bit about what kind of information you can find in the report, as well as give a few highlights from the data. And finally, I'm going to mention how you can get involved with the survey. And I forgot to mention that here in the room with me is Maria Cruz as well, who's also on the Learning Evaluation team.
I will be monitoring questions through IRC and the YouTube comments.
Yes, and yeah, I'm going to be going through the entire presentation first. It is a lot of content, so I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible, and then we can answer questions at the end. So, first of all, why surveys? Why do people do surveys? So people do surveys because we want to hear from many people, diverse people. It gives us, to some extent, some anonymity and privacy. We can learn qualitative information. We can quantify qualitative information. And it's a small way to voice your opinions and feel heard. It's also a good way to sample people, so you don't necessarily need to hear from everyone in a group. You can just hear from a sample of folks in a population. And it's important to put surveys into the context of our movement a little bit as well. Surveys are one of many ways for listening and making decisions with communities. Here's a list of tools for community collaboration. Some are more structured than others, but these tools are used across the Wikimedia movement because we are collaborative and we often need to hear from many people before we make decisions in our work. So I would like to take a brief look back in recent years about to show you, I guess, how surveys have been done at the foundation, especially kind of larger global surveys. So while we've done a lot of surveys, we haven't necessarily done them in a very systematic way over the years. In the past, surveys were often exploratory to learn from users, to learn about our users broadly. In more recent years, teams have wanted to know more about community feedback on specific projects or initiatives that they might be doing. And so you can see here, when I first started as survey specialist, I got a lot of requests from many teams. And so the problem was that teams had little time to carry out a big global survey that required translation. It takes a lot of time and energy for a small team to do a survey. There was no process for teams to get their survey questions answered as well, easily. And we work with communities a lot, yet we didn't have a really clear way to hear from them. And so we conducted interviews with teams to learn what audiences they worked with and what information they wanted to learn about these audiences, specifically community audiences. This helped us understand that there was a huge need for community audience data. On the left in the image are some of the audiences that we initially identified, which are core online communities, developers and technical collaborators. These are folks who create software, external partners, affiliates and program leaders, and all other editors. On the right are the data needs that teams had identified. Teams had information needs that were not being met so that they can carry out their work. And so this gap in the fact that teams were unable to get this data easily is what paved the way for community engagement insights. So what is Community Engagement Insights? It is annual global surveys to help foundation teams hear from communities we serve, so teams can make more informed decisions. And this was the first year that we've completed this project. So now I'd like to talk about the process and kind of what went into this process a little bit. And yeah, so again, CE Insights aim to solve some of these problems. So first, with CE Insights, any team could submit their questions, but in exchange, teams needed to donate time and collaborate to support the survey process. In addition, the survey heavily focused on gathering useful information that is more likely to be actionable for teams, as opposed to asking questions based on general curiosity. Finally, we hope that the project will be annual, so we can have year-over-year measures to help us track progress. And I just really want to point out that I was definitely not alone in this. A lot of teams supported across the foundation, and these are some of the individuals who helped with this project. And I think I'm also missing some of the volunteers who helped to translate the survey. So yeah. So the next few slides, I do want to talk a little bit about the questions. As mentioned before, it was a submission process. So teams were able to submit whatever questions that they had in mind for their work. Overall, we had 260 questions. Not everyone got all 260. The most people got was about 50 questions. But it's interesting to take a look at the questions and see what kind of, what information teams wanted to know about. And there's a few different ways to look at this data. So first is questions by team. So 13 teams participated at the foundation, and these are the teams. Yeah, that's it for that slide. The next way to think about the questions is, who do we want to hear from, or who are we trying to make an impact on? And this often we call our audiences. And so we focused heavily on community audiences. So these are editors or contributors, affiliates, program leaders, and technical contributors. We also had two other audiences who were not included last year, which were researchers and external partners. Other audiences like readers and donors are important, but they don't necessarily do work or do work to help us towards our mission, and they contribute in other ways. So they're outside the scope of the survey. The next way to think about the questions is, where do we want to make an impact? The questions that teams cared about generally fell into three categories: personal, Wikimedia environments, and foundation programs. So let's talk about these a little bit. So first, teams wanted to know about personal information, like gender and age. This information we can do very little about. For example, we can't influence someone's age or change when they join the movement. This information is primarily just to help us understand who our contributors are. Second, teams wanted to know about experiences within Wikimedia environments. So environments are different areas of work in the movement. I didn't have a term for this, so I kind of had to make one up. I don't know if it's accurate. But something to note here is that the foundation has some ability to influence an environment, but there are other organizations or individuals that affect these environments as well. So that's kind of what makes something an environment. Third, teams wanted to hear from communities about their specific programs and their work. The foundation has a lot of different activities that we hope will make an impact on the various environments. So these are kind of the three different categories that the questions fell into as well. And then the last way to categorize the questions is by goals. It was interesting to be able to, so when teams submitted their questions, we also asked them to tell us what is their goal for the survey, what are they trying to achieve. And so I was able to take that information and categorize that information that I got, and these were the 6 kind of high-level categories that came out, which are grow communities, improve community health, improve collaboration and communications, improve software, develop capacity, and increase access to resources. Yeah. And finally, within foundation programs, there's different types of questions you can ask. For example, an awareness of a program, how much people know about a program, whether they participated in that particular software or service, or if they have feedback or any outcomes from that program. So these are the types of questions that you might see in the report. I'm not going to be able to go through all of them, of course, during this hour, but I just wanted to roughly give you an idea of what kinds of questions you might find in the report. So let's talk a little bit about who we reached in the survey and a little bit about our sampling and response rates. So I'm going to start at the bottom right, volunteer developers. So we tried to reach volunteer developers or technical contributors. That's kind of two names for the similar group. But we had to primarily use mailing lists. And the reason is we did not have technical contributors and volunteer developers are in multiple spaces in the projects. And so it was difficult to come up with a random sample. So we had to rely on a convenient sample. And I can just say that our total responses was 129 people. For program leaders and affiliates, we have dedicated mailing lists for these audiences. So we were able to easily reach them using these mailing lists, or these, not mailings, email lists rather, or we have their emails. And so we were able to easily reach them. And lastly was editors. The sampling process for editors was very complex. I won't be able to get to it too deeply here, but I will say that we split the audience into two. So we had very active editors and active editors. Very active is 100 edits or more. Active editors were 5 to 100 edits. We messaged them through mass message because the banner system would not allow us to fully randomize as we would have liked for the survey. And finally, we were able to translate the survey into 12 languages. So the survey was accessible to many different communities. So how do we do with those audiences in our response rates? So overall, we didn't do too bad. For editors, we were able to get about a 26% response rate, and that varied. So if we look at the different groups that we sampled, it varied from 7% to about 50%. So some did really, really well. For affiliates and program leaders, our response rates were higher, but it's likely because we work closer with these groups, and so it's just more likely that they will respond to the survey. So overall, not too bad. We do have some work to do next time, but it's something that we are definitely looking at and trying to work on. So now I would like to talk about the data and talk a little bit about what we learned. These are only a few data highlights because, again, there were 260 questions in the survey, and we cannot, there's no time to go through all of them. But I'm also structuring this section in terms of the strategic priorities from a couple years ago. So, and those areas where communities reach and knowledge. So first, let's talk about communities. So the big question on everyone's mind is, did we reduce the gender gap on the projects? Generally, we do not see a lot of potential change from the last survey that was done about 5 years ago. And the median across editor groups is 10%. Just to explain this graph a little bit, the first 7 bars on the left are editors from the different Wikipedias. The language Wikipedias, and then other wikis are all the other projects. And then the 3 on the right are volunteer developers, affiliates, and program leaders in that order. So yeah, generally we do not see a lot of change. And what could explain perhaps not seeing a difference is lower response rates. So getting our response rates up would be really beneficial to try to see whether there is a change or not. So we got to keep trying and see and improve our survey process for next time. Community health is also really important to us. Like the foundation's employee engagement, like the foundation's, one of the surveys that the foundation does, we tested constructs that measures different sentiments related to community health. A construct is a set of statements that you either agree or disagree to, and together, these statements measure an overarching sentiment. For example, an engagement statement could be, I would recommend Wikipedia as a great place to contribute, and you either agree or disagree with that. The statements are typically about yourself. You're reflecting about yourself, or you're reflecting on like the other people in your community. And it's a good way to kind of test, see how things are doing. So we tested 6 different constructs, and the 4 shown here are the ones that seem to work well, and that we feel that they are likely to actually measure what we're trying to measure. For editors, we see that these constructs, most of them fall between neither agree nor disagree, which is basically the middle ground, and strongly agree. And we don't really have a benchmark to compare these to anything else right now. It's just because this is the first time we did this, so these are just some numbers to kind of see where people fall. And what we can say, though, is that within these constructs, we can generally see that engagement seems to be higher than, for example, problem solving or collaborative intent. And really quickly, I should kind of run through what each of these mean. So engagement is how well people felt connected to the movement. Leadership is perceptions of the foundation's leadership of the movement. Collaborative intent are perceptions of the Wikimedia environment, how collaborative does it feel. And problem solving is perceptions of cooperative problem solving and negotiation. I can answer more questions about these later as well. These are complex questions. So I did want to point out one of the other constructs actually that did not quite the statements did not did not hold together as well, which means that we need to kind of analyze again why they didn't work so well. But what is important to point out is that generally the responses for the statements in self-awareness were a little bit lower compared to the other constructs. So what is included in self-awareness? So what's included is that people empathize with others, people are aware of their biases, and people are aware of others' defensiveness. And so for next year's survey, we want to take a look at this construct again and see what might have gone wrong and why it didn't quite work together. But at the same time, we may want to also take a look at some of the work that we're doing in this area, just to kind of start to keep an eye on what's going on with our work related to these to self-awareness perceptions. And of course, related to community health is harassment. It's a confusing graph, but let me just explain it really quickly. So the story in this graph is that people reported avoiding the Wikimedia projects more than they did other spaces like Twitter or Facebook because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. Sorry, one second. So we see that users were 2 times more likely to report avoiding Wikimedia projects for 1 to 3 days than Facebook or Twitter, and 4 times more likely to avoid Wikimedia projects than Facebook, for 4 to 10 days than Facebook or Twitter. As we work on some of the anti-harassment tools and different programs trying to tackle harassment, we might see how these responses change over time. Also related to community health are various social issues that occur on the projects. So we listed a bunch of kind of known social issues, and we asked community members to say how severe, how severe or not severe this issue is in their projects. And so this is the kind of the ordering of severity. And so if we were to eyeball the priority or how much of an issue things are, the first two are things are too difficult to gain consensus on changes, and vandalism were kind of the first two. The second group was too much work going undone, complicated policies and procedures, unwelcoming environment for new editors, and incivility and rudeness is kind of the second group. It's kind of difficult to really distinguish between them and say which one is actually more important, but we can kind of get a sense of what, what are the top issues are. And for some of these, we're already working on software solutions for some of them at the foundation, so we can see how these might change over time as we continue doing the survey in the future. So now let's talk about reach. So when we say reach, we mean getting more people to know about the Wikimedia and the projects, or helping people learn about the projects. So we also ask questions about our brand as well, and how well editors know about the foundation and Wikimedia affiliates. First, we asked the scale question to learn how familiar they are with Wikimedia organizations, and we see that approximately 50% across all the groups reported being not at all or slightly familiar with Wikimedia organizations. The one that's a lot higher there in the middle is Oceania. I still don't know how to pronounce that correctly. But we had about 11 responses from that, which is why it's it can be so different, but it's such a small group. So right after that question, though, we asked a follow-up question where it was an open-ended question where we asked them to identify. 8% were unable to, and 4% were they mentioned foundation or nonprofit, but they weren't necessarily mentioning the specific organizations. Breaking this down a little bit further, it gets a little bit more interesting. What we see is for those who did identify an organization, so in the blue, 24 or 60% roughly did mention the foundation or some other project or some other affiliate, and 34% mentioned just an affiliate, and one person mentioned CIS, which is an organization in India who we work with often. From those who did not identify a Wikimedia affiliate, many identified the projects as a Wikimedia affiliate. So one of the things we're trying to do is increase awareness of our brand and the movement. And we can see that even editors may not understand some of the differences between the Wikimedia projects and the Wikimedia organizations. And so it's something for us to take a look at. In terms of getting the word out there about Wikimedia and the projects, affiliates are a great way to spread the reach of the Wikimedia brand, but they need to be prepared to do this. And so we asked affiliate representatives how prepared do you feel in using communications in the following ways. And they reported being a little bit less comfortable with brand management, engaging users, and public relations. And they reported being much more comfortable in using social media. And the communications team has been doing quite a lot of work with social media and trying to increase capacity for folks using social media. So that could explain the higher comfort level with social media. But it's just something to kind of think about for the future. So, and also related to reach are partnerships. So partnerships also really help us to spread the word about Wikimedia and the projects. And so we asked Wikimedia affiliate leaders and program leaders to share their opinion about the foundation working with various partners, the ones listed here, around the world. And as long as the foundation, of course, collaborates with local organizations when we do these partnerships. And there was very strong support for the foundation to do this work. And yeah, that's it. And finally, in the third section, we have knowledge. And then the knowledge area is about improving the contributor experience in curating and creating content. An interesting data point here, and it's a question that we never asked before, is how many contributors actually use resources and seek out non-Wikimedia resources for creating content? Not surprisingly, we had a very high percentage, which was 79% of editors look for other non-Wikimedia resources. And so, again, this is something that we've never asked before, and perhaps in future surveys we can start to think a little bit, we can dig into a little bit more, uncover about what kinds of resources contributors typically seek out. Just an open question, whether we want to do this or not. And the last data point, the last data highlight, is we asked a series of 22 questions that asked how important are these activities to contributors, and how satisfied are contributors with the software that supports these activities. We see some interesting differences between these different types of software. We see that the thing that contributors are find most important and are most satisfied with in the top right is adding content. The area that contributors find more important but are less satisfied with is uploading and curating media. The area that contributors are generally less satisfied with overall are translation and group discussions. And an interesting divergence that we saw was between the one-on-one communications, which you can find all the way to the right, and group discussions, which is almost all the way to the left. And in a previous slide, we also showed how consensus was a problem as well. So it might be related to the issue with group discussions. And so this is the first time we've asked questions like this as well. And so it would be interesting to see how things might change over time as we not only work through the different software that we're working on, not just at the foundation, but as a movement to address these different areas, but also as we continuously improve the design of the survey and we get better at asking these questions. So just to highlight that there are 260 questions in the survey. I do not have time to go through all of them now. So talking about what is the most important result, it really depends on who you are. Each foundation team had their own priorities. They had their own reasons for asking certain questions. And of course, every person who looks at the report might have their own kind of work or specific interests in mind. And so, so it really depends on who you are and what your questions are. And so, so basically go check out the report. And I want to talk a little bit about what you will find in the report. And show you some screenshots. But first, there are 3 different views to explore in the report. Some of the sections within the survey were randomized. So sometimes the participant N, the little N that you'll see in the graphs, is very small. So it might be just because it was a randomized question. You will find 2 different types of questions: scales, and which should add up to 100%, and check all that apply questions, which will add up to more than 100%. And the check all that apply questions are also labeled, so you can know that they're check all that apply. And finally, no opinion or I don't know responses are also really interesting to take a look at, because you can see how interested someone might be in a question or not interested. So, so this is a screenshot of the report. Again, these are the 3 different. There's a third view on the bottom that got cut off here. But you have different ways of viewing the questions. This is the first view where you can view the audience by the goals. It's a really kind of fun way to kind of click in and find survey questions. And so this is just an example of a check all that apply question, kind of what the graphs look like. And then this is an example of single choice. And if you click on the see more, it'll take you to some more additional statistics for each question. So now what's next with the survey? So we have just basically finished last year's survey, and we are already getting started on the next survey. We are doing it again, and we do need help. We're just getting started, but we are going to start reaching out to folks who are really interested in this survey, and so we can hear from, because it's always helpful to have community input and support with the survey. So, and there are many, many, many different ways to get involved. If you're experienced with research or survey design, then we do need some help improving our sampling strategy. We do need to increase our community awareness around the survey, so communities know what it is and why we do it. We need help with translation. So if you speak another language as well as English, it'd be great to have your help. Analysis and the reporting system is another thing we're thinking about. Is right now we publish the data on Meta, and it's not the most dynamic and easy to navigate system. And so we're kind of thinking about what else could we use if we don't use Meta. That's also publicly accessible for communities to use as well. And finally, your idea. So of course, if you have other ideas, we would love to hear them. Please email eval@wikimedia.org if you would like to participate or help out in any way. If you have my email, feel free to email me as well directly. But yeah, it would be really great to hear from you. And so that's it for the presentation. And I now would like to open up the floor to any questions that anyone may have for me. Are there any? Oh.
Yeah, so there was a question on IRC. I think it may have been answered already.
Okay.
So did the survey have a non-binary gender option?
Yes, it did. It was a very small, it was a very small percent, so it would have been very difficult to include in that overall graph. But yes, we included a question. There was a specific way, we found a specific way to ask the question. Do you remember what it was, Neil?
Yes, it was it wasn't just what is your gender, it is what gender do you, or what of the following most describes you, I believe. And I think the options were male, female, some other option with an empty, an open text box, and then prefer not to answer.
Yeah, so we did have a, yeah.
Cool. Yes, that's the only question we had, and then we had a comment from JMO about Hill and Shaw estimation of gender gap in a 2008 report.
Say that again?
A report published in 2008 about the gender gap on Wikipedia by Hill and Shaw. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we have another comment here.
So Arthur Richards had a question about this graph.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm gonna read the question.
Sure. Yes,
okay.
Please.
I was curious to understand what group discussion means. Does it mean online discussions like on Wiki, IRC, etc., in-person discussions like at Wikimedia or other events, both, or something different?
So it was specific to on the projects, and I think there was a description of I need to find the exact question. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it was basically having a discussion with multiple Wikimedians, whereas the one-on-one communications was talking to one or two other Wikipedians.
Yeah, and I think the question was written as which parts of the software do you find most important, and what is your satisfaction? So I think it was kind of framed as online group discussions.
Yes, online. Yeah, it was specific to online.
And then there was a comment by Fahid. He was saying that the social issues slide is quite interesting. I don't know if we can go back to that.
Very slow.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yes. And I think we don't have any more questions, but we can stay in line for 4 minutes. Yeah.
I can ask a question. I'm good at asking questions. So is there going forward, have you given much thought to, so you talked about sampling strategy. Have you given much thought to the length of the survey?
Yes.
I mean, just personally, I would probably not fill out a 200 question survey.
Yeah. So again, the question, the survey went to, it went to 4 different audiences, so not everyone saw every question, right? So it was about 50 questions at most.
Yeah. Okay, that's a lot more manageable.
Yeah, but at the same time, it still was kind of long for a lot of people. So we are looking at how we might reduce the questions. It's difficult because, again, every team at the foundation has their priorities and they have their laundry list of questions they want to ask. And so the focus is on trying to get teams to prioritize their top questions. And we're also reducing how many questions they can submit this year. But the goal is to prioritize our questions so that if we need to cut down the survey, we can. Yeah, so that's what we're going to try to do, and we'll see how that goes this year. But yeah, you do see a very steady decline in completion rate as people like move through the survey. So yeah, so we need to see how we can improve that for next time. Good question, thank you.
Cool, nice, thank you.
Yeah.
I get one more thing. I just want to put in a plug for if you are going to put the results, if you're going to experiment with new ways of showcasing and exploring results. I hope there's also always a version on Meta, because Meta will be, if you put something on Meta, we know for a fact that it will be around 10 years from now, for the Wikimedia Foundation researchers and Wikimedia movement researchers who want to know what people thought about all these things in, way back in 2017. It'll be on Meta. But if we only have our results available through another platform, there's no guarantee of that. So hopefully it's a both and, not an either or.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I have that same struggle trying to figure out how to make it interesting and not just a page full of words.
Yeah, the challenge we have with the survey though is that there are so many different questions and there's so many different ways to slice the questions.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it difficult to just add it to Meta. We were able to do it somewhat successfully this time, but it was a fun process to do. Yeah.
Wouldn't just making a PDF version and uploading it to Meta, uploading it to Commons and then linking it on Meta, produce the same archivability with a lot less cost of custom layout in the wilds of Meta?
Yes. However, it would be a very long PDF. Just put it that way. Yeah, it's
nice.
Yeah, there is a question of accessibility, right? Accessibility of the results, accessibility of learning from the results, and that.
Right, you can't translate a PDF, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, not just translate, but search and find, right? I mean, it's somewhat easy, but you can't categorize things easily. You can probably make a bunch of small PDFs, maybe.
Or you can search in the PDF, but if you're just searching on Meta, it wouldn't find.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And screen readers probably, I don't even want to know whether screen readers can handle a PDF.
Yeah, because we want to, because again, we also want to make this available not just to the foundation, but also to the affiliates who are often on the ground trying to work on, their projects. So filtering by region, for example, could be especially helpful for the different, groups that we work with. So,
Mhm.
so yeah. Are there any other questions online?
We have one person offering to help with the central notice banner
Awesome.
for the next time.
Great.
So they are going to email us at eval@wikimedia.org.
Wonderful.
If anyone out there would like to help in any of the other areas that Edward shared, please email us. Do we have the email address? There. Okay. Yeah, this is where you can contact us, and we would love to have more community members involved in helping us to spread the word about the survey.
Yeah.
So
We could really use all of your expertise, so it's not just like, yeah, because we have our perspective on how to do this from the foundation, and we would love to hear perspectives from other places.
Your email address implies you're the central hub for evil at the
Evil.
It's not intentional.
Evaluation.
Oh, I see.
yeah,
I mean,
we are also interested in having maybe different ambassadors or community members who are interested in spreading the word in the local community about taking the survey. Because as you can see, the survey data really helps us to focus on important problems or ways in which we can support community better through tech programs or direct support. So please consider this as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, Brendan, I think they cannot see the slide as they are looking at the room right now. I wonder if you can select the slide or.
They should see the slide now.
Okay.
We can see a slide on
Okay, cool.
Edward's
Oh, am I?
camera, and then we see the room through Herod.
Okay.
Cool.
The stream does see the slide now, though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so you have our email address there.
Yeah.
So I think
Is that it? Any other questions?
no, I think we're all good.
Okay.
We don't have any more questions. And yeah, I think that would be all. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.